Hello, today I'm here to talk about Keith Donald's take on definite descriptions. In his paper, Reference and Definite Descriptions, he contends that there are at least two uses of definite descriptions, the referential and the attributive use. So we'll talk about um, how he explains those and how they're used in our language. Okay, so for our purposes, definite descriptions are tied to one unique object. It could be a name, could be a proper name, or it could be a phrase. In this case, the example I chose to use is the mayor of Nantucket. Uh, it's also important to note that a definite description can be separated from a sentence or the entire sentence depending on the context and the intent of the speaker. For example, the mayor of Nantucket wears blue pants. That entire sentence itself can be a definite description. The mayor of Nantucket can be pulled out as a definite description depending on the context of the situation and the speaker. Suppose I was to say the mayor of Greensboro just put in, or the mayor just put in a stay-at-home order. The mayor just put in a stay-at-home order. Uh, the mayor would be the definite description as opposed to the mayor of Nantucket, just depending on how someone says it in everyday conversation. Okay, so the first use we'll talk about is the attributive use, or that Donnellan talks about. And for these purposes, I used my own example. And my example is a student picks up a random unsigned paper on a table and reads it. She exclaims, "The writer of this paper is a genius." This definite description is attributive because the speaker says this about a person without having anyone in mind. They're just acknowledging that the paper has a writer or a creator, which is obvious, but has no one in particular, has no idea who the paper is, just thinks that the person who wrote the paper is a brilliant person. Now, the second use is referential, and I use the same example, and the context is the same. The same student picks up the random unsigned paper and reads it. When she's finished, she thinks that it must have been written by David Hume. Judging by his writing style, the subject matter, prior knowledge of his writing, she just knows that it's in her head that it's David Hume. And she exclaims, "The writer of this paper is a genius." Uh, it's referential because she has this person in mind. She thinks that it's David Hume that wrote this paper. Even though she doesn't say David Hume, she's referring to David Hume when she says the writer of this paper. And doesn't have to be David Hume. It could be any person in particular that she has in mind. It could be a classmate, but the fact that she has in mind who she thinks is writing it, and therefore the writer of this paper becomes a different use. It's referential. So very much different than the attributive use when you use these two examples of the same example with different context. So in conclusion, I think it's very important to understand these uses compared to other philosophers, particularly for the philosophy of language. Donnellan disagreed with other philosophers, Russell and Strawson, particularly Russell, because he claims that Russell ignored the referential use of definite descriptions in his writings and his study of definite descriptions. Donnellan recognized an ambiguity in the use of these of definite descriptions, and I think it's very important to understand that moving forward, especially in this course, because of the study that we're doing with different philosophers such as Russell, Kripke, and Donnellan is referenced in Kripke's work, and I just think that the retributive and the referential use is very interesting and a viable way to use definite descriptions. Okay, thank you very much.